Now, we're all familiar with Santa Claus, even if there are some children out there who are terrified, and his magical reindeer. But what about Krampus, the anti-Santa, if you will? The yin to Father Christmas yang, as it were. According to European folklore, rather than giving presents to children, our dear friend Krampus chases them with whips and chains. And rather than a sack full of presents, he has a simple tub which he puts all the naughty children in before merciless dragging them off to hell. Sounds like a nice individual, doesn't he? And you can't forget about bribing him with mince pies and a glass of sherry. Krampus only takes a shot of schnapps as payment. Our universe is built upon the number 2. In our cells, DNA is composed of 2 helical threads. Matter has its opposite, antimatter. Computers run on a code built on 2 digits, 1 and 0. Likewise, religions are built around good and evil, 2 forces that oppose each other in both action and purpose. God has his counterpart, Satan. Jesus has his opposite, the Antichrist. The pattern even shows up in polytheistic religions. Thor has his counterpart, Loki, and the Olympian Greek gods and Greek mythology has their opposites, the Titans. However, one of the most popular mythological figures, Santa Claus, has lost the tail of his opposite, called Krampus. This being dealt out punishments to the wicked children of the world. For the particularly nasty children, the Krampus administered the harshest of punishments, abduction and death. Over time, as mankind's command of its realm expanded, our technologies and our own actions took the places that were once held by mythological beings. Nowadays, parents indulge their children with gifts, displacing the old Santa Claus. However, there exist parents who snap and do unthinkable things to their children. Every year, our news broadcasts stories of parents who went over the edge, almost like they were possessed by a demon. With no Santa Claus to reward the righteous, and no punishment for the wicked, both forces are unleashed indiscriminately against good and evil alike. For naughty children, for every naughty child, reward, a counterbalance must exist. Yang must have a yang. This is what a friend of mine told me in my first experience of camping. The soft thud of following footsteps echoed behind him as he hurried through the snowflakes toward home. They kept pace with him, quickening when he quickened and slowing when he slowed. It was creepy. His flesh crawled at the sound, and he sped up, cursing himself for walking home alone from the midnight Christmas Mass. Normally not a pious man, the middle-aged bachelor had suddenly been struck by a wish to hear the old Christmas songs sung once again by a church choir. And had he walked across town to attend the service? Now he regretted his choice as he passed dark house after dark house, in the snowy night, and the footsteps always followed. He sped up until he was nearly running, and skidded into his street. A few more paces brought him to the bottom of his front step, and as he dashed up them, he realized suddenly that the following footstep had ceased abruptly. He glanced behind him at the cross street from which he had just turned and saw only a pair of footprints in a snow-covered street when there should have been two. He frowned in puzzlement and then shuddered as a cold breeze struck, driving snow against his collar and slamming against the door. The freezing white powder seemed to almost pass through the door, but that was superstitious nonsense. His hand was shaking as he unlocked the front door and hurried inside. He expected black nothingness, but was delighted to see the yellow glow of firelight coming from his study doorway upstairs. His old housekeeper, whom he thought would be firmly asleep in her attic bedroom, must have lit the fire pending his return. He shrugged out of his coat and paused for a moment, amazed to find it still warm and dry, though he had walked for more than a mile through a snowstorm. It was almost as if he had been walking in a bubble of calm air, though he remembered the soft snowflakes hitting his face when he first stepped out of the church, before the mysterious footsteps began. His shouldering was interrupted by a shout of greeting from his old friend Andy, came hurrying out of the study. His whole face lit up in a grin at the unexpected surprise. The two men shook hands heartily and retreated back to the warmth of the firelight, talking so fast that they stumbled over each other's words. Andy had left town years ago to take a government job in D.C., and they hadn't seen each other since. Nearly an hour passed before it occurred to him that his guest might be hungry. His offer of a meal was instantly accepted, but Andy was unwilling to leave the comfort of the fire to eat in the kitchen, so he jogged downstairs alone to fetch some food. He didn't wonder at his friend's reluctance to join him in the kitchen. Andy looked very pale and kept shivering with cold while they talked. He hoped his friend wasn't ailing for anything. A few moments later, he was back with warmed up meat and potatoes and a couple of glasses of beer, apologizing profusely as he handed Andy a plate for the mismatched dinnerware. Andy just laughed and hunkered down to eat. When they were both finished, he showered his friend to a guest room. When they were both finished, he showed his friend to a guest room and then tumbled into his own bed to sleep. All his apprehension caused by mysterious footsteps forgotten in the visit of his friend. He jumped out of bed Christmas morning and dashed immediately downstairs to the room to rouse his friend. Andy wasn't there, and the bed had not been slept in. He ran down to look in the study, but Andy wasn't there either, and one plate full of food was sitting on the end table beside his old friend's chair. It was completely untouched, though he'd seen Andy eating from it the night before. Skin creeping at the thought, he ran to the kitchen and asked his housekeeper if she had seen Andy, but the housekeeper had seen no one either the previous night or this morning. He flopped down on the bottom step of the staircase, completely baffled. Where had Andy gone? It was a mystery that plagued him all Christmas Day, and he did not enjoy his holiday dinner at all, a fact that annoyed his housekeeper. He was awakened the next morning from a restless sleep by the sound of the front doorbell. He stumbled out of bed and was splashing water from the bedside pitcher onto his sleepy eyes when a knock came at his bedroom door. When he answered, his housekeeper handed him a telegram that had just arrived. As she hurried back downstairs to prepare his breakfast, he opened it curiously, not knowing who would be telegraphing him so urgently. As he read the telegraph, he started to tremble. The message was short and to the point. Andy's family regretted to inform him that his old friend Andy had passed away on Christmas Eve in his home in Washington, D.C. He sat down hard on the bed, and the telegraph fluttering away from his hand. It must have been Andy who had followed him home on Christmas Eve. That would explain the eerie footsteps and the dry coat in the middle of a snowstorm. He must have spent Christmas Eve with a ghost. I could never sleep well in hotels. I guess that's somewhat of an understatement. I could never sleep well in general, but hotels were the worst. Just the thought that the previous occupant of this bed is a complete stranger was repulsive in my mind. But that's besides the point. What I'm getting at is how the lack of sleep in hotels changed my life. Christmas. We were spending Christmas in a shitty hotel and not with family. Great. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I didn't enjoy the all-you-can-eat buffet of soggy hash browns and grits for Christmas Eve dinner. Of course, the first snow of the season had to cancel our flight down to Virginia. It was Christmas Eve, and I was trying to sleep in this bleach-saturated room. My mind's wondering what happened in here to cause such an excessive amount of bleach needed. The room was nothing out of the ordinary. 2 beds, one for me and my dad, and another for my sister and mom. A bathroom, and a stained microwave that looked in need of a good dusting. Somehow, I escaped the room and stench of bleach into a dreamless sleep. Waking up, I could tell it was early morning. My dad was next to me snoring, and he usually wakes up before 4 a.m. That's when it hit me. It's Christmas, and I was about to let this bad fortune ruin my favorite holiday. Looking across the bed at the clock to check the time is when I noticed it. The silhouette of a man about 6'3" across the room staring at my mom sleep. Still half asleep and caught in the moment, I couldn't help thinking of Santa Claus. I realized how stupid the thought was, and horror soon filled my head. I choked back a shriek. I knew I couldn't let him see me. So I quietly put my head back down, pretending to sleep. My mind was racing. Someone was in my room, and I couldn't do anything. I was scrawny 16-year-old. This man looked built like an ox. I wondered if I could wake my dad up in time, but I knew that wouldn't work. He slept like a rock. A bucket of water couldn't get him up fast enough. I was practically in tears. I never felt so hopeless. For a second time, I choked back a scream. He was standing next to me. I could feel and hear his repulsive breath on my face. It smelled like he had been eating rotten meat for a week now, with no thought to brush his teeth. I didn't know I was awake. If he didn't know I was awake, surely he did now. Seeing my face was contorted in fear. The breathing stopped, and I couldn't help but sigh a relief. I would have kicked myself, but there was no need. I heard the room door open and close. I launched out of bed. Nothing. In the room was in disarray, and my family was still asleep. That couldn't have been a dream. I couldn't have imagined it. Feeling awake as ever, horrible idea popped into my head. Before I could push it away, I was pulling the door open. Glancing back to the door in order to memorize the room number, I saw the giant spray painted black X on the door. When I had I seen this without prior experience, I probably would have thought it was just some stupid kids. I knew better, but not enough to know what it was for. My heart skipped a beat. There he was, turning the corner at the end of the hall. Why am I doing this? I tailed the guy down to the parking lot. He was nowhere in sight. One moment he's walking out of the lobby, the next he's gone. Realizing how cold it is outside in paper-thin pajamas, I returned to the lobby. No one was around. Strange. I could swear there's usually a night concierge. Adrenaline wearing off, I realized how stupid and rash my actions had been. He could have killed me. I cursed myself back up the stairs. I knew something was wrong when I got to my floor. The door to my room was wide open. I hadn't left it that way, right? I walked inside, and after a quick search of the room, I determined it safe and my family was still asleep. I locked the door and got back into bed, though I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I listened to my dad get up and eventually my mom followed, but I still pretended to sleep. A few hours passed and my parents got my sister and I up. We got into the car and made our way back to the airport. Digging through my bag to grab my iPod led to the finding of something that hadn't been in there the previous day. A note that simply held the 5 words I still think about to this day. I knew you were awake. It's now been 2 months since the hotel experience. I'm still scared for my life and it gets worse every day. The note I found wasn't the only one. I still received them. And that was the 4 short tales of a terrifying Christmas. Sorry it took me so long. Just been busy with the fam. Family comes first. But as always, I do what I say, and I promise you guys a whole bunch of video. So instead of making 4 individual short creepypastas, I decided to put them all in one. Also, tomorrow I will be doing a top 10 video, but leave in the comments of what the top 10 should be. Having a hard time deciding between top 10 horrifying facts about Christmas or top 10 creepiest mysteries that was never solved. So leave your comment below, like and subscribe. It really helps. The more you like me, the more I help. It's a win-win.